So Chris, what initially drew you to the Roman baths as a source of inspiration for your work?
Right. Yeah. Yes. Well, a bit background. I had previously worked on 2 seasons of a series of radio programs and podcasts within museum contexts, and that sort of involves a very much sort of categorical approach at looking at objects. You're very much working within indexes, if you like, and the environment of a museum is brilliant because you can really sort of hone in on a sort of a sharp focus of an item or an object. My experience of it. What's very different about the Roman baths, and what was an exciting sort of prospect, was this kind of labyrinthine approach to a place and an environment. It's also a natural feature within the city and the landscape around it. So as a sound person, recordist, musician, that really invites a new approach. I was really excited about this because it means that we can do something much more site specific.
Yeah.
And just a little bit broader and just that little bit more challenging. But yes, yeah, that's
because I met you before at Crinium, and you were very much focused on objects.
Yeah.
And when you came here, it was that whole exploring the site and also the spring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It actually, I should say, it coincided with a time, back in the beginning of 2023, when I was just really first discovering spatial audio and ambisonics, which was mentioned in the film. And some of the footage from live performances, you'll see us surrounded by speaker arrays, which are all around us. So, yeah, this was a journey of discovery in itself, and this is a great way of doing that. So just a quick explanation of that is, as opposed to, say, a sort of what you might call a binary approach of stereo left-right, with ambisonics, your acoustic reading of a space is much more sort of 360, and so there are ways in which you can sort of design the sound playback, and the way to listen to a place in sort of a very sort of close detail at times. So we're combining that with the hydrophone recordings under the water as well. Yeah, and so on. Yeah, this was a good time for it. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to open this question up to all of you. What did you love about working on the site at the Roman baths or with the collection?
I think for me, obviously through my life, I've been a visitor to museums. You go to a place, there's a museum to visit, a should, a must, tick the box. And this was the first time that I've ever got really closely engaged with the site. I researched, reading all the history of the site, the discoveries, the myths, the stories about deities, all of that, and then coming into the site and finding the deeper layer of the stories and being able to kind of try to find ways to allow the site to tell the stories and how to do that. It's kind of, as you yourself said in the beginning, there's so many stories within the water. It's kind of all these permanent things that have been within this archaeological site throughout ages that haven't changed now. And trying to find ways how to accompany the music and the words without overtaking over like finding that balance, but allowing. So I think that was a big thing, and also it was the first time that I worked as a visual researcher and as a documentarist at the same time, which both sides kind of pulled and tugged and added to each other, which was an interesting way to further progress my art practice as well. And but it is like, for me, it was very much the getting at a deeper level of the site and then trying to pass it on through visuals to the audience that might not have that privilege of having the access to the site, to be here and there, like at 7 in the morning on their own. So having that closeness.
It's much the same for me. I spent a lot of my childhood, my mother was a poet as well, and she wrote quite a lot about ancient sites. We went to Cornwall, we went to Stonehenge. I can remember climbing on Stonehenge when one was still allowed to do such things. So being in the kind of by the King's Bath, by the Sacred Spring, as you say, at 7 in the morning, with the almost unable to hear the city as it wakes up, almost. It's just this trace element of modernity, and to kind of have that emotional connection back to something, and finding myself accessing things I'd forgotten actually, that I'd learned kind of age 6 or whatever, running in my mother's footsteps. It was very exciting. But also, of course, there's all this new information and the sounds, and finding the footage and kind of being able to kind of have been there in the quiet and go back and see the footage we saw of things underwater, these incredible images of flailing things that you just wouldn't expect to be there. It's been a real privilege just to be able to immerse.
Yeah, I mean that's it, isn't it? It's that. For me, I'd agree. It's this this time that we had early in the morning. It does something to you. I mean, just in and of itself, there's a heightened sensory experience. I think at that time of the day, there is something special about it, and being here to experience that really. It kind of knocks you out in a way. It kind of brings you really sort of, well, yeah, this is it. That's what I loved about it, and it sounds strange, but it sort of clears your, everything you're worrying about and kind of trying to sort of solve in a sense. And certainly for me, it allowed me to just sort of stop and listen, and that was Hopefully that privilege we've had is translated, and it can, as you say, can communicate something to people who can't get so close to the baths, can see but can't be that close to it.
And I would agree with you. First thing in the morning, on a cold morning, when you get the steam, it's so atmospheric. Yeah, it is. It does feel very special. Chris, what role do you see sound playing in reinterpreting historical spaces and objects?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I've had to sort of discover what this is, having worked at Corinium Museum and done, and also in the landscape, in the Neolithic landscape of this area. I mean, I'd say sound can bring, in museum contexts, sound can bring objects back to life. And I think this is a really interesting thing because, we might not have the voices of the people who made a particular object or experienced a particular thing or a place, or the sound world that inhabited those things perhaps at the time. I'm not trying to say that I'm able to reenact or recreate anything like that, but I think what sound offers, and this is to do with it being sort of a non-verbal experience as well, it sort of introduces a living aspect. It can do that. It can sort of bring you closer to, something that's been recorded in the moment, and then sort of juxtaposed to an object. There's something magical that can happen, and I think if you sort of can start exploring that, then all sorts of things are possible. So yes, and it's good for me because it takes me away from, you know, the technical aspect of music in the studio, of, you know, diminished ninths and, you know, kind of chord changes and think, well, I mean, all of those things are there actually.
Yeah.
But it certainly, it throws open, you know, it goes both ways, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I think museums have been traditionally quite visual
Right.
spaces, and that's changing.
Mm.
And museums are opening up sort of multi-sensory spaces, and I think the more we can add to that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
interpretation.
this goes to, you know, the sensory experiences of touch and of light phenomena. I think this is very important because all of these things are physical aspects of our world.
Yeah.
And you know, with sound, we're dealing with, you know, it's a physical entity. There's a kind of a transducent act going on. You know, tiny hairs in our, you know, pressing against nerves inside our ears, and this is a very, very real thing. I think once you start tapping into that, there's so much more going on. You know.
Dominyka, how can the visual arts help interpret the monuments and objects?
It's a very interesting question. I thought about it a lot. I think, as you said yourself, museums have been very visual in themselves. But after this research project and after this experience, I think what I felt is that, especially a museum like this, which is an archaeological site with a museum around it, what we can get we can get historical facts, we can read about it, we can listen audio stories about it, but what we cannot, I think, and what I was trying to, what hit me was the fact that this space is so full of meaning. The space was so full of meaning. Like, it meant a lot to people. Like, so much, you know, believing in goddess and stuff. It was full of that meaning, but it's not there now. It's now a tourist attraction. You come in, you pay the money, you go visit. So I think that that's where all arts and visual arts can come in and try to kind of bring that meaning, bring the feelings, the thoughts, the emotions, the emotional connection. Because, you know, you can see the objects. You know, I used to go to museums. You look at these things, but they things, right? Like, you kind of perceive that they're historical artifacts and they've been dug out and caught, right? Yeah, but like, if you're not deeply interested in history or archaeology, that kind of just like is the facts that at some point will go back to your head, to the back of your head. And I feel that's where the arts come in, because they can actually bring you closer to the stories and try to bring that meaning out, because that's what I really felt in those, after knowing the history and the stories, and it's kind of going, but where is the meaning? Like, it meant so much, like all of the space was so full of emotion, you know? Like all these curses, they're full of passion. But we just come in and walk, look, leave. And that's where I think the arts can come in and help.
Yeah. And Adam, what about poetry? What role can that play?
Well, when we were working on Corinne Museum, I think it was Tim Darville, the archaeologist, said to me, particularly, we really mustn't make too many assumptions in archaeology. One thing that poetry can do is make a few assumptions. And as Dominyka says, put you into the headspace. Here particularly with the curse tablets, you've got, as you said to us, there's kind of very rare access to what is enervating the people at the time. You don't get these private grievances, thoughts, despairs, whatever, very easily unless it's of kings. And so there is a great deal that poetry can do, because it's a fusion, poetry at its best anyway, of image, sound, emotion and idea. So it can give a little bit of a way into a very, I mean, visual arts can have a broad scope as well as, because you can go really minutely in the poem if it's done right. I hope Amanda.
So to all of you, in your view, how can art forms like film, poetry and sound offer new perspectives on historical sites?
Do you want me to take this?
If you like. Yeah, go for it.
In my opinion, in many museums and textbooks, there are so many years of one-sided narrative, which is the victor's narrative. And I think it's a hard thing to push against and start introducing other narratives. I think it's not easy. There's a pushback against it. And I feel that arts, all arts, visual, poetry, spoken arts, sound, can help with empathy and can provide kind of ease people in to the new narratives. It's kind of provide a gentle immersion into different stories. That's my interest there.
Yeah. I mean, there's an opportunity, isn't there, to actually listen a bit further. I mean, I think new perspectives. I mean, we're combining perspectives, and that in itself is we're redressing some of our own views within the process of making the work, which you find yourself in that sort of cycle of reinterpretation, which is very important just in our own practice, I would say. So then I suppose what I'm saying with that is the combined process, because you're re-evaluating and you're reassessing. There are always going to be untold stories and bits that have been forgotten, and some of those things actually don't need to be explained too. So I don't know. This is an opportunity, isn't it, to kind of combine invention with one's view and one's experience of a place, and that can be a very personal. I hope kind of very personal, human experience for the viewer and for us, for the listener. Yeah.
I mean, for me, one of the big things, this came from a comment you made early on in one of the interviews when we were researching. It's quite even with the goddess, the double goddess Sulis Minerva, it's quite a masculine place. And so the most pleasure I took was...
It is now.
Sorry?
It is now.
Oh, it's gonna change.
No, yes. What I mean is that it's very, very masculine in orientation. It's to do with men. It's even Sulis Minerva really kind of focuses on... Minerva was a very kind of, in the Greek and Roman myths, was quite androgynous really, and served the needs of men. Greek counterpart Athene helped Odysseus do all the things Odysseus did, etc. And there was the one object, the sword pommel, ivory sword pommel carved into a pair of breasts that were cast into the water. And I very deliberately have closed the sequence of poems, which are being published next year as a book. But I closed the whole book with that shift. And this is where the assumptions start to come in. Can play with it. What were they thinking? Who cast this in? Why? And there's that little trace there, and so it's worth pulling at those threads
Yeah.
I think it's quite important in museum work anyway.
Yeah.
Generally, as is happening with this. This is part of that thread pulling.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what it. I mean, that off chance comment from you led to the end of the book. So I'm very grateful.
How does your sound map challenge or reframe traditional narratives about the Roman baths?
Yeah. Yeah. I suppose. I don't know, because one thing I didn't want to do was just retell a story that had already been told, and probably very well by somebody else, perhaps. But yeah, I don't know whether actually. Okay, I'll go for this. I'm not sure whether this answers the question completely, but being able to kind of come closer to the translations and transcriptions of the curses was very illuminating and very it was very surprising for me, and I know, Adam, this is one of the first things that we were keen to prize out a bit more, because where were they, and they're there, and anyway, as soon as I started hearing other people reading those translations and bringing them back to life, if you like, which is what happens, to me it was amazing what was possible with that. We could really run with that. I could follow it. It wasn't sort of something that I necessarily had to sort of grab and put my stamp on. It was like, let those voices speak, and actually, yeah. So this was, trusting that, and trusting what's already here, was a key thing. It was a way into, doing something new. And that sounds like it's coming back on itself, but it was really important to do that rather than, I don't know, try to put too much of one's impression. I mean, inevitably that's also true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could I have a question again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
How does the sound map challenge or reframe traditional narratives about the Roman baths?
Thank you. You take it. I need to.
I was waiting for you, so I could think.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, the music itself is a challenge, because it kind of, I mean, the way Chris has composed it and improvised with people, it kind of creeps around you. So it's kind of, without sounding ridiculous, a little like a Marx Brother, kind of creeping up and surprising you in a very good way. And it's all about this. It's kind of building a picture that I think what it does is allow people's own interpretations to come out a little more, because it's feeding something. So the combination of the visuals, the poetry, and Chris's music takes the kind of the viewer, the listener, in a direction where they can make their own decisions, but kind of bring their own ideas to the fore, but have a little bit of guidance without being told, well, this is a sword.
Yeah.
They did this with that.
Yeah.
Here's a sword.
Yeah.
What do you think happened to it? It's kind of allowing that sort of thinking space, which I think is helpful. Because it creates an emotional engagement with the source material.
I think to add to that, it's like it's probably that all forms of art are subjective. There's no right or wrong, and the way people will see it, view it, and what they take from it will be individual, and it will connect with different people. So I feel like as artists, we will put all we have into it, and I feel like the way Chris challenged the traditional narratives is by getting a lot of women's voices to voice the curses, because his like traditional narrative is very, like you said, it's a very, like you said, it's very masculine, but actually introducing more women's voices into the reading of the curses rather than choosing majority of men's voices.
Yeah, that was important. And also, there are over 15 different languages reading the curses. It was important to do that, to find those voices too, and those voices, we were really lucky actually.
Yeah, so many languages, so many different stories. And visually I think the way I really look at this is again about those many untold stories, like you said, and I think what really chimed for me is the mythical and mystical space of mythical and mystical properties of this space. And I feel like all of our collaboration ended up really like the music and the poetry, and then the visuals kind of really worked with that. So it's kind of presenting like a finding stories in the paving slab, finding stories in the way that, you know, like the way water moved when the wind blew thousands of years ago, it still does the same now, you know? And the way the vaporizes, it still does the same now. So it's kind of coming back to that. And when I was recording the underwater shots, I was trying to see what we can't see now. Like, you know, we're not allowed to go into the water now.
Yeah.
And people used to do that. Like, this is what it was here for. People used
Some
to
people
submerge. Yes. Oh, they're cool. So you swam in it, and it's amazing. So like you would submerge yourself and see those bubbles. You'd be able to float in the water and see the sides of the building. And that's what I was thinking. How to try to get into the past and get closer to, you know, to the history, to the, you know, we see people like Roman times and since we look at that historical period as like it's gone, right? But actually we're not that far away from that. Like in a flash will be history. So I feel like I was trying to
Sure.
Okay. There's I think it was Donald Rumsfeld came up with the strange phrase, the known knowns and the unknown knowns. But it's quite useful in this, because I think what we're trying to do is to present alongside the known knowns, the unknown knowns, and things the things that, if you pardon the pun, bubble under in the kind of core, the kind of the mythic spaces within our kind of collective memory. So it's trying to bring both, and I think the fusion hopefully brings a feeling of all that out a little bit in people coming to the museum.
The meaning, bring back the meaning of it.
Allow access, channeling access
what
to
it
that
meant
feeling,
for people.
because I don't think we've lost it as a species. I think it's just kind of been
Interlude.
knocked out by mobile phones and the daily commute, which is quite necessary for all and quite difficult sometimes.
Okay, so the biggest question, the last question. As we're currently working on our reinterpretation to reimagine the Roman baths, in your view, how can sound design and artistic interpretation make archaeology more accessible and engaging for a wider audience in the future?
I feel like it's similar thing. It's engaging people emotionally and like giving more space and allowing time and space and place to immerse yourself more into the history and realize we're not that far from it. We're really connected, and how the past is connected to the present and how it is connected to the future. Like, we know we're all one really, and I feel like arts and immersive arts can really encourage that. And it was interesting because we did installation at the gallery in Cheltenham where we presented a documentary and installation that you'll see, but more with like a visual aspect of the water from the King's Bath. And obviously it was not on the site. On the site it would be much more powerful and engaging to have immersive experience, and that you will have more of these immersive experiences in the future. But what was really interesting to see from the installation at the gallery is seeing people engage. So like we had the projection of King's Bath, bubbly water on the ground, and the speakers that you will see later speaking all the recorded curses.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to see how people engaged with that. People allowing themselves to stand on the water and then hearing, really listening and allowing them to almost like, you know.
Yeah,
and
that's true. People bring, it's very exciting to see what people bring to the work. And this could be a subtle thing to it's difficult to talk about when you experience that and see that, and you're close to that experience with somebody. It's pretty compelling.
And I also think that the traditional way the museums have been presented are very much, I can't think of a better word, but more neurotypical. If you know, like it was very like academic.
Voice of authority.
Yes, voice of authority.
Fact.
But actually,
Sure.
there are so many people in the world that would engage with the subject matter, with the museums, with objects, with everything, if they are immersed in it. And art is I believe art is one of the ways to do that.
Yes, and you know, equally, you could sort of see it lends a lot to the practice, the art itself, to the practice of being able to reinterpret a contextual experience like this within a museum, within a site like this. I mean, and for me, it goes to show that, you know, it kind of proves that the arts are not an aesthetic. It's not a purely aesthetic experience. It's not. It doesn't have to be about that. I mean, it goes beyond that. And you know, if it was purely aesthetic, it wouldn't have the kind of central place it has in people's lives. There is something immediate about it, and there is something effective about it that sometimes you can't quite pin down and say exactly what that is. So this experience really allows us to experiment with that, to follow that. And you know, I was thinking about this earlier, in the beautiful thing that the mid-century minimalist painter Barnett Newman said was along the lines of aesthetics to the arts is what ornithology is to the birds. You know, I mean, I can't improve on that, but I mean, it's this two-way thing, and that's really much more possible when we're allowed to sort of challenge and go into
Make occasional assumptions.
Bring things to life.
Bring things to life. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.
Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
I congratulate you. What I was amazed at is, in all the years I've lived here, I've never seen the Roman baths without people in it. And what I found was happening was I was going into a meditative state, as one would do when you get into meditation. And with your poetry, Adam, that led me to wonder, I don't know where it came from, but to wonder the sort of religiosity of the Celtic Roman conflict that must have happened around these bars in 2,000 years ago, or whatever it was. I found, and so in answer to your last question, if you could somehow knit this into a sort of meditative experience, I think would be a wonderful exercise in the bars. I mean, I could see this as a start film to any number of the retreats I go to, in the right mood. Very early morning, yes.
Somebody else mentioned that it was they've never seen Roman baths from this perspective before.
Yeah.
It's really nice to hear that, because, like we said, like it felt like a real privilege to be.
Well, I
in
thought
that
I knew
posi-
everything about the Roman baths, and now I know nothing.
Well, I'll take that as.
That's the first step on the path to wisdom, though,
Yes.
is to admit that you
Yeah.
know nothing.
Yeah.
We knew nothing, or little, and it's
Still don't.
Indeed, and it's just been. It has been. I mean, as I said in the film, I used the air conditioning to meditate into my way into the poem. So I'm really glad that it's
I
translated.
thought I'd take that tip.
Try it. Yeah.
Try it. Sean.
Congratulations, it was absolutely mesmerising, and I finished your performance and I thought that was superb, but this was better. I speak in the Clore Learning Centre, I am a teacher. What I've just seen is perfect for teaching children poetry. Your sound maps are just brilliant for little children, for big children. Is there any future in enabling children to use them or see them for that purpose?
I'd absolutely love that. Yeah, this is a real something that, yeah, we'd like it to be available and
There was at one point a kind of suggestion of QR codes that we could access such things.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a possibility. I mean,
Yeah.
it's quite a simple one, actually.
It's one of the things we're looking to do, is the sound as the water goes through the site, is to have QR codes so you can hear some of the music that Chris composed at those particular areas.
Poems as well, perhaps.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Poetry,
The combination of the words, the sounds and the music is such a stimulus for small children, big children.
Yeah, actually, I mean, this is great. I mean, it's not something that we've done on this project that we've done so much of is with experiences with younger people, with children, would be really, yeah.
I'm really glad you think it will work.
Yeah, that's nice.
Thank you.
We do have to move on because of time. We've probably got time for one poem.
No, that's
from
fine.
you, if you-
Yeah, no problem. It is National Poetry Day, so you have to have at least one more poem. So I'm going to read the one because you'll know, or most of you will know, that in myth the baths were founded by Bladud, father or son of King Lear? Father of son of Lear.
Yeah.
So very much a mythic king, and there's the image of him above the king's bath. So I went back into my old kind of Beowulf era poetry and the kind of the alliterative poetry, and wrote a poem about Bladud, the myth of the swineherd. Bladud, bad luck, bad king, blood on his lips, blood on his skin. Myth of the leper, myth of unwashed sin, myth of the swineherd observing his pigs as they wade on down into divine hot mud. Slip, slump and wallow, until skin unpocked, smooth, less sallow, they rise, roink and rattle off into the forest, run back into myth. Bladud, bad herder, born to good luck, little battle, follows the pigs that were his deep into hot springs. Bladud, bad king, loses leprous lesions. His skin sings as he slumps, slides and slips into mineral mud. Myth of the miracle, myth of the heat that cleanses the man who decides to be king, puts a stone in the ground, a sword in the stone, builds a city around it, forges on alone. When the truth is forgotten, pull myth out of the mud. Rebuild round the springs with tales, gods and blood.